My name is Tiffanie Harrison, and I am a marketing educator at Round Rock High School, suburb of Austin. I teach primarily young entrepreneurs. In fact, I'm heading out to Atlanta today to support a group of entrepreneurs that will be competing in the FedEx Junior Business Challenge. So I believe in secondary education, and I believe in that as a means for college and career readiness. So I'm really happy to be here today. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists to you. We have Dr. Eric Ban, and Dr. Eric Ban is from Dallas County Promise. And as I introduce you, I will let them speak a little bit about themselves in just a moment. We have Isaac Torres. So Isaac Torres is from E3 Alliance. We have Sarah Saxton-Frump, and Sarah Saxton-Frump is from PelotonU. Did I say that correctly? Mm-hmm. Great. And then we have Melissa Sparks from Toyota. So if we could start with Dr. Ban, will you please give us an introduction?
Great. Hi, my name is Eric Ban. I'm the Managing Director of the Dallas County Promise. We're about a year old, and my background is 20 years in public high schools. Most recently as a principal in South Chicago, was a university professor at Indiana University, and worked for about a decade in Dallas building higher ed companies to help scale online learning across the globe. So the Promise really originated through the leadership of the Dallas County Community College Foundation and the chancellor at the Community College And so we wanted to be smarter with how we applied our scholarship dollars to impact change across Dallas County, focused on 60 by 30 with equity.
Hello, I'm Isaac Torres. I'm the Director of High School, College, and Career Success at the E3 Alliance. My experience is mostly in the collective impact P16 landscape, mostly from the community engagement side of things. E3 is a data-driven education collaborative here in Central Texas. We are a nonprofit, and we are the stewards of the strategic plan for the region to kind of create the best, strongest educational pipeline in the country. That manifests in many ways. That strategic plan has 4 goals: school readiness, closing achievement gaps, high school, college, and career success, which I facilitate, and community engagement and accountability. And we work in a collective impact framework, and we serve as a backbone organization in that framework. I'm just happy to be here. Thank you.
Good morning, y'all. I'm Sarah Saxton-Frump. I'm the co-founder and COO of PelotonU. We are a small but mighty nonprofit here in town that helps post-traditional students go back to college. So they might be 18, but they might also be 50. And I'll talk a little bit about how we do that in just a second. My background is in K-12 originally, and that's where my passion comes from. And so it's a joy to be in a room full of fellow education, dare I say it, nerds, potentially. And I started my teaching career in South Texas in Brownsville, and then spent 5 years at the first KIPP high school here in town as both a high school history teacher, an assistant principal, and a principal. At Peloton, we are taking a sort of supplementary approach to how we fit into the post-secondary kind of spectrum. So whether there's somebody pursuing a certificate for something like HVAC or pursuing a bachelor's degree at University of Texas, we've seen that there's a need, particularly for post-traditional students, to have a really high quality and flexible and supportive option, which we are providing by blending the best of really high quality competency-based online degree programs with the best parts of the traditional in-person experience. So all of our students are matched to their best fit online program, which we've vetted for quality, and then they're actually coming to a physical space to get weekly coaching, accountability, encouragement, kind of like Naggy Aunt meets cheerleader meets personal trainer in our space, and we're seeing 80% of our students persist and go on to earn a degree.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Melissa Sparks. I work for Toyota Motor Manufacturing Texas, the plant on the south side of San Antonio. So we have been in Texas since 2003, so we're celebrating our 15th anniversary this year. We have about 3,200 Toyota team members who work in the south side of San Antonio with us, and then we just brought in another 4,000 team members into the Plano area, where we relocated our North American headquarters. So Toyota has 10 plants across the US, and in every single location that we work in, every state that we work in, we make sure that we are focusing on our community, building up the area around us, the people around us, and For San Antonio and for Texas, what our strategy involves is focusing really on workforce development and STEM education. For us, STEM, of course, is very important, but we really stay in the education realm. So if someone comes to us and asks, say, hey, can you sponsor my bowling tournament so we can raise money for this? Well, we're gonna say no. But if you come up to us and ask us, can you sponsor our robotics team? We will be all about that. We'll give you money, we'll give you mentors, we will give anything that you would like in the area of STEM education. And we work in the area, we work in the age ranges from kindergarten through bachelor's, sometimes even master's degrees.
Amazing. So we want it to be clear, when we're saying post-secondary continuum, we are talking about readiness. We are talking about not just being ready, but also having access. And so, Sarah, you said something really interesting, or you used a word that I think is really important in this conversation. You said spectrum. Mm-hmm. So as you can see, this panel represents a spectrum of allowing access and promoting readiness. And so we're not only looking at readiness and access, we're also really looking at completion as well. And so today we only have about 30 minutes, so I'm going to ask a couple of questions. I'm going to target them to one panelist. Panelists, feel free to respond if you have something to add, and then we'll go ahead and take some questions at the end. So my first question is, what are the challenges facing students as they transition to higher education? And Eric, that's for you.
Great. Again, with the Dallas County Promise. So we've really thought about college completion in three big buckets. So first is we want to remove the affordability issue with families. So going into our highest poverty high schools, we started at 31 of the highest poverty high schools, about 9,300 seniors, and just with a simple message we learned from Tennessee, college is, there's a free tuition pathway for all, period, regardless of income or GPA. So removing that perceived and real financial barrier for students. Secondly, just because it's free tuition doesn't mean it's going to work any better. And so students need help often transitioning and moving through a complex college process. So students are assigned a success coach. They are partnered with a community-based career mentor, and then the community colleges have all organized around career pathways, and they have a pathway advisor. So starting this year, there's 3 new focused adults who are accountable for the success of every student as they enter the community college system. We didn't stop there. We know that their systems and our processes have to improve. So not only are we helping students get college ready, we need to help colleges get student ready. And so these are our most vulnerable populations of students in Dallas County. And so we are working diligently with the colleges and universities using data through the Commit Partnership, of which we are housed in the Commit Partnership, and really focusing on continuous rapid improvement in our colleges to break down barriers and to really understand the progression of our students so we can improve and respond to their needs.
Amazing. Would anyone else like to speak to that?
Well, I guess the challenges facing students, it's a multitude. I mean, where do you begin? At home, the economy, the culture of our society, and then once they get into school, what courses are they taking and passing? To the coaching aspect of it, our counselors are overwhelmed, so who's going to stand in that gap, as it were, and kind of facilitate, broker those connections for a low-income, first-generation student who needs to get into post-secondary education? Who's going to make that connection for them? So there's the financial need, there's a coaching need, there's just an overall kind of collective support need in aligning ISDs to higher ed institutions, connecting with community-based organizations, with industry and the community at large. Yeah, it's cliched, but it does take a village, as it were, to like really make this happen, and we have to do something radically different if we're going to meet our statewide objectives.
Amazing. You guys spoke of really preparedness, so it's not enough to get students access and to get them in the pipeline. You have to prepare the pipeline and the system to fully support those students, and so that's a great conversation around really what equity means and giving each student what they need and not assuming that they have the cultural capital to succeed in existing systems. So very important work. Would either of you like to speak to that?
I would just echo your comment on both getting students ready for institutions and getting institutions ready for students. And Eric, something you said that, like, if I were in a poetry slam, I'd be snapping to is it's not enough to make sure that school is free, right? Like, that's an important piece of it, but that there are so many other challenges students face. So just really excited for the students in Dallas County, the work you guys are doing.
Absolutely.
And I absolutely agree with everything that you're saying, because something that we notice as industry trying to help build a future career pipeline for our next generation of employees is that you see people who are from vulnerable populations getting a full ride scholarship maybe to one of our 2-year degree programs, and they cannot follow through because they are first generation students. They don't have the historical knowledge, the family-based knowledge to know how to succeed in school. So that mentorship, that coaching that you guys are providing is excellent. We do the same thing. In any of the scholarships that we provide, we have learned through trial and error, unfortunately, that we have to provide a mentor who can help guide the path and ensure success.
Absolutely. So as a K through 12 educator, this is a very exciting conversation because it makes me feel that people that are making decisions are truly supporting our students all the way through. That being said, my next question is about K through 12. So actually, Melissa, I'm going to start with you, and anyone else can jump in and add. So how can K through 12 and higher education work together better to support students?
You know, I think it's more than just K through 12 and higher education. I think it's K through 12, higher education, and industry.
Absolutely.
Because as a person representing industry, I have to say that if K through 12 and higher education are not producing the workforce that we need, then we're in a bind, and then the students who are graduating without the ability to get a job are in a bind too. So we really all have to work together. You know, that village is a real thing. And what we have found is the most successful. You know, when we came into San Antonio 15 years ago, there was no manufacturing pipeline for us. And so we really had to start at the very bottom. We started in pre-kindergarten. So we sponsor STEM programs in San Antonio's pre-kindergarten program. So the city, in case you guys are not familiar, has a tax-paid pre-kindergarten program that is free for any student. You know, they take all the students who are low income, and then they have a lottery for any open spaces that are left. And they're phenomenal programs. So we've had to start there, but really we've learned that we have to build up, you know, we have a long-term, midterm, and short-term strategy. And our long-term strategy obviously starts with pre-K. Midterm, we're at the high school level. We are working with, we take high school interns over the summer to expose them to potential jobs. And it's really that hands-on experience that can make or break someone being interested in going into the college programs that we have. You know, even if we want them to come in maybe at a skilled team member level, which is a 2-year degree for us, that we have a fantastic working scholarship program for, that high school internship will either whet their interest or it will send them running in the other direction, either for the trade or to go on to be an engineer and still come back to us. So either way, we want to make sure they get that hands-on experience. So industry needs to be involved from the very beginning, or students just don't know what their options are, or they don't have a realistic idea of what their options are.
Absolutely. So I like how you are really saying that we need industry partnership. It's a partnership. It cannot be standalone, just education.
Yes, industry has to be involved from the beginning. And it's really, I think, a failure of industry's part that more industry is not involved. You know, our educators are out there every day doing what they can, but if industry is not willing to go out there and talk about the job opportunities that are there and the career or the education that you need to have in order to get those jobs, then that's on us.
Absolutely. As a classroom teacher, you know, I teach marketing and my students run a campus-based business that's very profitable. And I found that, you know, I can say things forever, but when someone from industry comes in and partners with us and gives that expertise, it's so valuable. And there's also a disconnect between what you're learning K-12 and what is out there for you career-wise. So I understand what you're saying. It's very important. And would anyone else like to speak to that?
I think in Dallas County, we woke up on second base and we didn't hit a double. So the industry, the community college, the regional universities, and K-12 had been working together to really expand the early college model in a very significant way, really targeting our students of most need. So there was some collaboration that existed really through the leadership of Dallas ISD and many others. And so we benefited from that synergy. The question was, how do we do this for all students? And so as we went in and leveraged the promise as a scholarship, we leveraged it in an opportunity to say, we're wholesaling this. We're not retailing this scholarship. In order to become a wholesaler, i.e. the high school, you have to step up and meet certain requirements for all students and have to pursue these with intensity. So we look at the A through F framework for high schools in Texas, and I know this is a policy conversation. It is insufficient to transform communities. So what does that work have to look like in the high school? No kid walks out of this high school needing college remediation ever again. We see maximum growth in college skills through either the SAT or ACT. Every Promise high school has to do a pre and post, pre-PSAT, SAT, or pre-ACT, SAT. Every student is selecting a career pathway and have significant, meaningful work-based learning. Every student earns a minimum of 12 highly transferable credit hours before they leave these high schools, all students. So we're leveraging the promise to really kind of create a new framework for Texas high schools to say, this is what should be happening in these schools. Now, if you do this, we're going to bring a powerful lever to you called free guaranteed tuition for your entire community. But we're leveraging that scholarship to really generate this new framework for high schools to produce the results that we need. And we're doing it, again, with intensity, because if you look at Dallas County and you look at our underrepresented kids, our students who are economically disadvantaged, and you look at the coordinating board data, when they were sitting in an 8th grade Dallas County classroom, 10 years later, 6 years after high school graduation, 1 in 10 had a 2 or 4 year degree. So you could be on the first wave of D-Day and have a better chance of making it to Berlin than our 8th graders in public schools have earning a college credential, which is the gateway to our tremendous economic opportunity in Dallas. So we're leveraging that scholarship to really change behaviors, to change thinking about what happens in these high schools. Sorry, a little passionate.
We love the passion. Thank you.
I think there's other indicators too that in that kind of communication flow between school districts and higher ed institutions, sharing the best data needs to be at the forefront, wherein our data suggests that direct to college, full-time enrollment with supports in place, all of that front end coaching and financial aid preparation in place are predictive, along with some math course taken and other things, but are predictive of a student being more likely to persist and complete. Why don't we communicate as well as we should? We're all in, well, not all of us, but school districts, higher ed institutions, these institutions wherein it's cold machinations with compliance and accountability, and people do not want to think outside of their box, do not want to enter a radical space. One thing that E3 is able to do is we're able to convene those professionals or practitioners in a space where they can think a little bit more differently and maybe exercise their professional expertise in a way that they can't on campus within those systems. So there's an argument to be made that, I'm going to say it again, this radical space where we can really transform the systemic alignment by communicating between higher ed institutions, school districts, and all the other kind of players.
Absolutely. Partnership over everything, really.
Yeah.
Did you have anything you want to add, Sarah?
I will hold until I think I get the next one, don't I?
Okay, you sure do. So, Sarah, and anyone can chime in.
Yeah.
What are barriers to students once they enroll in higher education?
Yeah. I was like, I don't know that I can count that high. There's quite a few of them. So I think one of the things that was popping around in my head while you guys were sharing about the K-12 and post-secondary partnerships is that there seems to be a tension between the kind of long-term needs that we have to change the way that those two systems work together, and then the very real short-term kind of urgency we experience with the 60 by 30, with the fact that these are like individual students' lives that we're talking about, that until we have figured out how to create this kind of systemic reform, they are continuing to fall through the cracks. And I think one of the different lenses I've been able to look through with my work at Peloton is not just working with the traditional 18 to 24 or even 18 to 26-year-old, but I get to work on a daily basis with the folks who have fallen through the cracks 30 years ago, right? And so I'm getting to see what has happened in those students' lives over not just the 6 years post 8th grade completion, but in fact a couple of decades of having to work, raise a family, figure out how to make ends meet, and what does education look like? And so I just want to, in a room of policymakers, I just want to exhort you to be thinking across a couple of horizons. And I've experienced that people have kind of a propensity for one or the other. So it's long-term systems change, it's going to take 10, 15 years, or these like very intense short bursts, and I think we really need to see both of them. In terms of barriers, I think there's kind of all the obvious things that you would think about, right? There's academic preparation, there's the fact that if you go into a developmental course, you're 80% more likely to drop out. There's the fact that if you don't enroll full-time for the first time, that decreases your chances of graduating significantly. There's all the logistical things, right? There's FAFSA and registering for classes. How many of you guys have tried to register someone for classes at a college recently? Yeah, I have a master's degree in educational administration, and I can barely figure it out. If you take a first-generation student who's trying to register for classes for the first time, they need an expert, and they need somebody who is more of an expert than I am. That's how confusing it is. And I think universities have an opportunity to make that process a little more seamless, but we'll get to that later. And then I think one area that folks tend to kind of skip over, because it's a little bit harder to pin down and identify, are many of the emotional obstacles that our students will face. So there's rampant imposter syndrome. So a lot of times students who have either struggled in school or who will be the first in their family to attend a post-secondary institution don't believe that they belong. And though they are probably one of, I don't know, every other person on that campus who feels the same way, there's a sense of isolation and shame that comes with that experience, that when we can create safe, supportive environments for them, they're able to persevere through those kind of internal challenges. And it's one of the biggest ones that we've seen at Peloton with our students who are returning to college after having been away, or maybe having failed a couple of times and dropped out before, is that there is this incredibly loud kind of, we call it a shame tape that's playing in their head. And so I'd love to see us, in addition to all of the wonderful academic and logistical support that we're doing to help students, also think through what does it look like to tackle those kind of mental health, emotional, kind of inner world barriers that often get overlooked as we think about these conversations.
Absolutely. So we're having lots of SEL conversations in the K-12 arena, but that needs to extend far beyond. So that's very important.
Yeah.
And so the chancellor of the community college system in Dallas, Joe May, is really pretty passionate about 3 out of 4 Dallas County students are economically disadvantaged, and those needs and those services they get in the K-12 system, they don't go away when they come over to higher education. Mm-hmm. So the Promise students are supported on a number of fronts. So there's a lot of food insecurity initiatives going with food banks at all the community colleges. All students get a free DART pass for public transportation. There's a lot of work with Parkland Hospital around healthcare and mental health services, and we're trying to connect that all to our success coaches who are actually hired by the community college system. They're college agnostic, but working on that kind of the affective side of supporting students as they hit those challenges and have needs. Also working with the Community College Foundation on kind of a strategy around emergency funding for students when they hit certain walls and life happens. So we don't have it all figured out, but I think there's a lot of the right conversations happening to really support kids through those barriers.
Absolutely. Any thoughts? I'm going to give you a moment to really tell this room of policymakers what you believe the world needs, but anything else to do with our last topic before we do that? No? All right. So this is your moment. Wide open. What policy changes do you think should be made at the state level to support students' post-secondary success? So there are some conversations in the works, and that's great. There are some conversations we aren't having. can you each just go down the line and take a few minutes to tell us what needs to be done to support students post-secondary?
Starting in the high schools, our accountability systems are just not aligned to produce the results that we need. So I'm inside of Dallas County high schools consistently, and I'm an old Indiana high school basketball coach, so you practice how you want to perform. So what do you want the outcomes to be, and what is actually happening in these high schools? So we have an accountability framework around end-of-course tests, and now we're bringing in some post-secondary elements to that through the A through F. So it essentially is, we're trying to get maximum number of students over a minimum bar. That is the game that is being played in our Texas high schools. And that minimum bar is not aligned or leads you to college success and success in the workforce. We're doing our best to enter into and bring in these CCMR indicators, which is good in one respect, that we're now paying attention to all students. But again, it's a minimum bar. Get every student something, right? And so is that going to produce the results? We talk about 60 by 30 with equity, but our activity, our accountability, our policies need to drive towards those outcomes, and they currently are not. So that's why we're constructing a accountability framework for the Promise on top of this, which is really hard for a high school principal to do, play 2 accountability games. So I've got to play this Texas accountability game, which gets maximum number of students over a minimum bar, and I have to play this Promise game, which is around community transformation, college completion, and social mobility. So I would kind of ask us to step back and think about, what do you want to happen in these high schools based on the research, based on what we see around the country, in terms of, shouldn't we be measuring the growth of the college and career readiness skills of these students as they're moving through these high schools? Shouldn't we hold high schools accountable for ensuring that no student is leaving this place needing college remediation? Shouldn't we hold high schools accountable for helping parents complete those financial forms, FAFSA and TASFA, so that they have the funds that support them? These things are not part of the high school accountability system, but these things are extremely important if you want to help high schools help their families to move the bar on college outcomes. So there's a host of things that we have to be a lot smarter about. And again, I encourage you, I spend 50% of my time in these high schools. Go watch what happens in these high schools. Go watch them practice and see if they're, on game day, if we're producing what we need to produce as a state to hit that 60 by 30 with equity. That's a big lift, and we have to be really a lot smarter, in my judgment, around policies that will drive the behaviors of the leaders inside of these high school buildings. So that's my kind of challenge to you, is to think smart about what we're really asking these high schools to do.
Absolutely, thank you.
I think there's not a college readiness measurement that is sufficient to kind of tag on to Eric's comments. That aligns with the high school curricula, and that indicates post-secondary success. The TSI does not do that. The House Bill 5 requirements since 2013 require only those students who are distinguished or in STEM tracks to take Algebra 2 before they graduate, wherein our data show that students who, take Algebra 1 by 8th grade are more likely to complete college level math coursework before they graduate, and those students then who complete college level math coursework before they graduate are more likely to persist and succeed. So Algebra 2 and higher than that need to be or should be passed in order to kind of predict that success of the student. So currently, under the House Bill 5 regulations, a student has to opt into those advanced math courses. There's a case to be made for all students having to opt out instead. And now that puts a strain on those of us who don't excel in math, but that has to, our data show that this is a crucial piece of preparing students at the secondary level for post-secondary success. And if we can create a policy that says every student has to then opt out of those higher advanced math college level courses, then we can deal with that. But that would be a kind of structural thing that would be indicative of greater post-secondary success.
Thank you.
It's funny, I've been out of the K-12 space for a little while, so I haven't been thinking about K-12 policy issues. I like feel myself getting hot under the collar. I'm like, that's right, we should opt out of Algebra 2, amen. But I'm gonna beat my post-traditional student drum, right? So a post-traditional student is someone who is commuting to school, working 20 or more hours a week while they're attending school, going to school part-time or caring for a dependent or a child. And our system, which is also, by the way, 70% of today's college students across the country. And our system just wasn't originally built to serve a student who is working 20 plus hours a week, commuting, attending part-time, or taking care of a kid. So I would really encourage us to think about policies kind of broadly that facilitate more programs offering the kind of flexibility and the support that those kinds of students need, because I think they're going to be an integral part to us achieving our 60 by 30 goals. If we're only focused on folks coming out of K-12 or who are already in that 18 to 24 band, just like mathematically those numbers don't add up. I think very specifically what I think about policies for adult students that could facilitate them being more successful in their post-secondary careers. There's a couple of rules that are the 3-peat and the 6-drop rule, if you guys don't know these. So if you repeat a course more than 3 times, or if you drop 6 or more courses at a Texas public institution, you then have to pay out-of-state tuition, which if you're a student who hasn't been in school for 20 years, there are some, we've got some problems to solve about why they're failing 3 times or dropping 6 classes in the first place. But thinking about how we can continue to facilitate financially pathways for returning adults to come back and stick around. I think it'd be really interesting to look at tuition guarantees, maybe for like 125% of the time of your program. So if you're pursuing a bachelor's degree, getting a tuition guarantee for 5 years for a degree program that's supposed to take 4. And then I would also just be really interested in thinking through how we can create some maybe different pools of financial support, particularly for working adults and post-traditional students and student parents who are coming back to school. So it is entirely possible. You get 12 semesters of full-time Pell Grant eligibility. And if you have been slowly chipping away at your bachelor's degree, maybe taking a few courses a term for 10 years, odds are you've run out of your Pell Grant funding, not for lack of effort and not because you're not serious about pursuing your degree, but because the circumstance of your life kind of preclude you from going that full-time, first-time route. And so how could we create some financial pools that support those students as well? And then lastly, I would just think through, I don't know how many of you guys dabble in the 2-gen world, but research shows that if you're providing services both for parents and kids at the same time, it's the fastest way to end generational poverty. We have a huge opportunity not just to help more people in Texas earn their post-secondary credential, but also to create families where the students are, because of their parents, then opting into Algebra 2 in 15 years. And so what would it look like for us to really think about policies that support student parents and that we kind of throw everything we can behind them, knowing that that pays dividends not just in this generation, but the next one. That's my soapbox. Amazing.
So from an industry perspective, I have to say there are 2 things that we are focusing on policy-wise right now. The first being, I think we're all prepared for kind of a fight this coming legislative year in terms of funding. It feels like every year's a fight, but a fight. And I think we need to strategically start thinking about what we are funding in schools. Are we funding things that are beneficial for our students, or are we funding things that we've just always funded? Are the careers that we are leading them towards actually in demand? When they graduate, are they going to have a job available for them? And is that job going to be something that they can support themselves with? So I think we need to start looking at return on investment for our students. We're pouring money in, are they able to get something out of it? And the other policy issue that we look at in our community, our local community, is what do our students look like versus what our teachers look like. So we see a lot. We actually worked this past session with Representative Barbara Gervin-Hawkins to pass one bill. I'm getting my bills confused, sorry. So we're working with her right now on an initiative to get more men of color teachers into the classroom. Obviously, because we could always use more teachers, but because our students need to see men and they need to see men of color as role models. And so she had a fantastic idea in the East Side district that she represents. We have a lot of men who have graduated from college and are now under or unemployed. And so we are working with her to get them credentialed to be teachers and get them into schools. We have a great partnership right now, even with some of the school districts that we work with, and they have agreed to serve as mentors and also provide access to classrooms while they're getting their credentials. And so that's another aspect that I think we really need to take a close look at. Are we serving our students, not just their minds, but their entire physical, mental, emotional well-being through the types of teachers that are represented for them?
Amazing. So thank you each so much. I have chills just sitting up here listening to this diversity of thought, diversity of experience that all centers into wanting success and wanting post-secondary readiness, access, completion. So we've heard from the panel, and I would like to field a couple of questions. We have just a few minutes from the audience. Does anyone have any questions for our panelists?
To
encourage the teachers to stay?
That is an excellent question. I have to say, when we were starting this program with Representative Barbara Gervin-Hawkins, something that we started hearing from some of the principals was that there was just a lot of burnout. That's a reality. Teaching is not an easy profession, and I don't know why a lot of people, maybe people outside of teaching, still think it is easy. So I guess the short answer is no. I don't have a solution other than making sure that we keep communication open. Maybe, I know you work in CTE with marketing, maybe we need to create a marketing plan to tell people how hard it is to be a teacher, but also how worthwhile. And maybe some of the programs that we're establishing for students to help their mental and emotional well-being, we can also facilitate for teachers. That make sure they have access to stress relief and maybe, I don't know, rotate out through different years. Maybe for 2 years you have really hard ages and grades and particular subjects, and then for a year you get something a little bit easier to recharge yourself. I obviously don't work in the education sphere, so maybe that's completely foreign and couldn't work at all, but I think that maybe if we take some of the creative roles that we are modeling for our students now in school and we apply those to our teachers also, we might be a little bit better in making sure that they are willing to stay, but also people who are outside of school look at it more as a long-term career option for them that they hadn't thought of before.
So I'm facilitating this conversation, but I am a teacher, and I loved what you had to say, and I loved to hear that there's some intentionality behind pursuing hiring teachers of color. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is retention. And as I hear represented in this conversation, there's diversity of thought and experience, which I said before, and there's partnership. But what's missing from some of this partnership is actual teachers. Mm-hmm. So it's not enough to hire teachers, you must retain them. And actually, teachers are the innovators that education is looking for. So people need to be asking teachers what teachers need in order to stay. That's really important. Any other questions? We have time for one, maybe two questions.
In the back.
Yes.
So I have a question for the gentleman from Dallas County Promise. So you talked about the accountability system, and actually it's not aligned, right, with the college, career, military readiness needs and what we're seeing, right? That's the whole conversation of what we're hearing today. Not the whole, but a lot of that has been discussed. What are you hearing from, say, TASA or TASB, about the accountability piece? Because basically what you're saying is we need higher standards of accountability and alignment in that accountability. So where are you getting pushback from other organizations that are also advocating for policy changes, but to really, I don't want to say weaken, but just have sort of fighting that accountability piece?
Great question. I think, just to be honest, we're a year into moving a cohort the size of the state of Rhode Island and increasing their enrollment in the community college by 40% in 1 year. So I really haven't, other than kind of working in Dallas County and down here much, talking about this, but just unpacking the work with these high schools. And for example, in Samuel High School, it's amazing, but 99% socioeconomically disadvantaged students. They graduated 60 kids with their associate degree before they got a high school diploma. And they're playing the state accountability game on top of that. Then we're coming in and saying, well, that's not going to work to really get us. And the principal there is amazing, but she's saying, wow, we can't do all the things we're being asked to do. And so I'm just kind of encouraging us to think smarter. There's things happening across the country that are models. So nothing I'm saying is new or inventing from scratch. Just looking at growth, just simple growth on the SAT or ACT over time is a pretty fair way of looking at what did you do with the student when you got them to when you completed them. And then all of our schools by design are giving all students the ACT or SAT, or some cases both. And that gives students kind of a policy leg up. If you look at the stats in Michigan, where once they did ACT for all, how many more economically disadvantaged kids got into and through college just because the state policy put them on the scoreboard with colleges, reaching out to them. And so simple things like that are not, complex. But we would be very interested in participating in the statewide conversation about that A through F and how to make it better.
Absolutely. Molly, can you check my time? Okay. Do we have another question? Yes.
Hi. Sarah, you touched a little bit on the two-gen model. I would just love to hear from the rest of you, or a little bit more from you, about effective strategies that you're seeing to engage parents to support children or young adults at home to reinforce some of the opportunities you're providing for them.
So we have, on top of the Dallas County Promise, we have the Dallas County Parent Promise.
Okay.
So if you help your student get free college, we'll give you free college too. So we have, we tested it in the Grow South initiative in South Dallas in about 7 high schools. We have 50 parents now going to school with their children. And again, these are foundation dollars, private philanthropic dollars that fund these scholarships. We've picked 50 high demand careers, 26 certificates, 24 associate degrees that lead to jobs paying over $24 an hour. Those are the ones that are available to parents. We want to assure with our workforce community that whatever program they get in, there's going to be a high paying job at the end of it. But again, we're a year old, and so we're testing out that intergenerational thing with, again, there's 50 parents and students going to college together, and we're tracking them, and it's pretty inspirational when you kind of see that going on. So
It's amazing what you've been able to accomplish in a year, by the way,
Yeah,
being a year
seriously.
old. Wow. Questions?
You have time for one more?
We have time for one more.
Melissa, can you tell us what a young Toyota employee looks like? A first-time professional, are they credentialed, are they college graduates? Do you have a span of experiences you work for?
We do. We actually have 4, I guess you would call them, categories of team member. There are people like me who work in administration. I happen to have a bachelor's degree, but I would say maybe it's a 50-50 split in administration of those who do and those who don't. The vast majority of team members that we hire, and this is specifically for the plant in San Antonio, the the vast majority of team members we hire are assemblers who work on our assembly line, and they need a high school diploma or a GED. And from there, we can train them up. We prefer actually that people come to us with no experience. We want them to have just soft skills. Can you show up to work on time? Can you follow directions? Can you get along with your coworkers? And then we will give you all of the skills that you need to succeed at your job and also to move up within the company. The other type of team member that we have is our engineers. Obviously, engineering has a very robust pipeline. We don't have any problems hiring engineers. The one area, the one category of team member that we do have a very hard time getting in San Antonio and actually around the nation is our skilled team member. They're middle skilled people. They are the ones who have a 2-year college degree. They work with us to maintain and repair our automation and our robotics. An extremely high demand, well-paying field. It is so high demand that we have a program nationwide. We call it the Advanced Manufacturing Technician Program, and that we have modeled a FAME program around the country on. We started in Kentucky, that's where our first plant was. So we have Kentucky FAME, Indiana FAME, now Texas FAME. In order to, we understand as an industry that we cannot be the only ones out there trying to fill this pipeline or to build this pipeline. So we have a need for team members, and other companies in San Antonio have the same need. So we've created the program and allowed other companies to join in with us to create other team members like this. You know, when we were maybe 3-4 years ago, Amazon opened up a warehouse near us in town, and we lost 13 skilled team members in 1 week. That is how high the demand is. And you know, it's one of those things that the grass is always greener on the other side. So some of them came back to us and some of them stayed, and we get some more from other companies, but we can't continue to poach from each other and expect the industry to succeed. So that's why we've started FAME. And right now, I'm happy to say Texas FAME is in its 2nd year. We went from 1 company joining us to now we have 7. When we were doing the A&T program by ourselves, we had a maximum cohort size of 20 students a semester, or I guess a year. It's a 2-year program. And now with the other industries, other companies joining us, we can have 40 students a year. And very happy to say that of the students that have graduated, 79% are now employed by one of their FAME sponsor. So I say sponsor because the model is you go to class 2 days a week at our local community college, and then you work with us 3 days a week, and you are paid. It's a working scholarship, so that amount you are paid during the week pays for your tuition, your books, your living expenses. And so 79% are now employed by their FAME sponsor, and the other 21%, if my math is correct, have gone on to higher education.
Amazing. Thank you. We have time for one more question. If anyone has any burning question. Okay. Well, thank you, panelists, for sharing your expertise. Thank you.